Good morning, I'm Adrienne Alpert, and we welcome back to this program Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, you recently, what we just heard you talking there was the House Foreign Affairs Committee in a hearing on U.S. cyber diplomacy and the worry that Russians are interfering in the ongoing election and the one coming up.
Right. I'm very concerned about that, and I think that Congress needs to act. I certainly think the President needs to act. The President needs to impose the sanctions that Congress voted on, and he's been stalling on implementing. But Congress needs to act, too, and provide the resources to communities around the country to make sure that they can protect the voting integrity of the different communities.
What evidence do you have that this is going on right now?
Well, there's lots of evidence, and some of it is discussed in a classified manner in the Intelligence Committee. But, you know, even on the issue of gun control, you know, as soon as that horrific massacre happened, there was evidence that the Russians were interfering on social media to create a divide within our communities. And so there is violations in terms of the voting system, but more than that, there is the division that they're trying to create in different communities to discourage people from voting, and that was one of the things that was revealed in the Mueller indictments.
Now, this is when you talk about that kind of interference, this is fake accounts on social media, Facebook, the bots primarily, putting theories out there, saying certain things. There's the whole thing that some of the students who have been protesting against guns, who were victims of that shooting, were actors. There's been that put out there too.
You know, I thought that was so sad. I mean, these young people are just stellar. It has been so exciting to see them step up and their involvement that they're really spurring around the country. But to know that they're also in the middle of the grieving process and to have people say that they actually are actors, I think was just horrible. And we know that there was Russian involvement in that.
In that for sure.
Right.
What can you do now? Okay, absent not getting some kind of sanction from the president, what more could be done to get the Russians out of the election? Well,
it really is the sanctions. I mean, the president needs to enforce what Congress voted on, and he signed the legislation saying that he would impose sanctions, and he just hasn't done it. And it just really raises the question, why won't he say anything against the Russians in terms of their violations into our voting system? Lately, he's been saying it was all about Obama's fault, so maybe that's a step forward. At least he's acknowledged that there's a problem.
Now, let's this wraps up into the Parkland, Florida shooting and what's being said about guns and ways to regulate them.
Right.
We have just heard recently from Wade LaPierre, Executive Vice President of the NRA, who says anybody who talks about gun control right now is exploiting a tragedy for political gain.
Right. And you know, he also said, and the president said, that what he was interested in was background checks. But we will see, because I will bet a week from now the president will change his position. We've seen him do that so many times. What there needs to be is a ban on assault weapons. And I feel bad that the students actually went to the Florida State House, to the state capitol, and while they were there, they witnessed the legislators who wouldn't even allow the bill to be voted on to ban assault weapons.
But they did vote on a bill for pornography.
Exactly, exactly.
But going back to what Congress can do, and the fact that the president did have a listening session with victims and survivors of gun violence, and came out saying that background checks, raising the age to 21 before you can purchase a weapon. Are you saying that's the kind of thing you think he's going to renege on?
I absolutely think he's going to renege on that. And I think when we go back in session, and I'll be back in D.C. tomorrow, when we go back in session and he gets the pressure from members of Congress saying, you can't do that, we can't buck the NRA, that impacts our campaigns, I won't be surprised to make him change, that if he changes his mind. But remember now, he also had a suggestion that I thought was particularly horrific, and that was the idea that we need to arm teachers.
My next series of questions.
700,000 teachers should be given bonus pay to learn how to carry a gun. Can you just imagine that?
I don't know how many teachers would be willing to do that. He thinks that there would be. He thinks that the bonus would encourage them to get the right weapons training and be able to carry a gun in class. But as a parent, I wonder if parents would be feeling very
I would imagine parents would be horrified by that, because if you think about most of the mass shootings, not all, but most of the mass shootings that have occurred on campuses have been students. So now the teacher should be armed to kill a student? I mean, it just makes no sense. That is just not the answer.
Well, now we also hear, though, very sadly, that the security guard at the Parkland School saw the gunman but never went back into the classroom. So you have to wonder if people aren't battle tested, I don't know what other way to use it, what these gun-carrying teachers would do if actually confronted with the issue.
It's just ludicrous. And you can imagine the way the rest of the world is looking at us right now. We are the only country on the planet that has this problem. And then the solution to it is to have more guns. It's very, very sad. We know what needs to be done. I wish that Congress would act. But if you think that Congress didn't act after first and second graders were slaughtered, why do we think they would act now? And that's why I'm so inspired by the students.
Do you feel any sense among your colleagues, there must be some conversation going on, that there might be some momentum to make some changes?
Well, I actually don't think so. I think that my colleagues believe, similar to the president, I don't think they believe that there should be 700,000 guns, but I believe that they do not agree with banning assault weapons or extending background checks. You must remember that one of the first bills that Trump signed was a bill to loosen regulations, gun regulations on people with mental illness. That was a bill, of course, that passed through the House and the Senate. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. We recently passed a bill that said if I'm from the state of Texas and Texas has open carry laws and I get on a plane and I fly to California, I should be able to have open carry, reciprocity. So can you imagine that? I mean, that bill has been passed. So what we have done in the time I've been there is pass legislation related to guns to loosen regulations, not strengthen them.
You know, we have to harken back to when you were first appearing on this program, when you were the Speaker of the Assembly in California and were part of a majority in the state and in a legislative body. And when you left for Washington, I asked, because you would be in the minority at some point in the voting, you know, what this was going to be like trying to put forth any agenda that would never have the votes behind it. How has this been for you these years?
Well, on some of the big issues, it's been tough, but you know, there are issues that we work on in a bipartisan manner. They just tend not to get a lot of publicity, and I'll give you an example of a couple. So one of my areas of focus is child welfare, improving the nation's foster care system. And we pass legislation to improve the nation's foster care system. As a matter of fact, we recently had a very large piece of legislation with a lot of different components to improve the foster care system. I work on trade-related issues to Africa. That's a bipartisan issue. I work on sex trafficking. That's also a bipartisan issue. So there are issues that we work on, but the big issues in terms of health care and, you know, the tax bill, those are not bipartisan issues.
All right, Congresswoman Bass, we have to take a break. We'll be back with many more questions right after this.